for those of you that have seen the exhibition, Alec has done the prelude piece, which is a little three-dimensional piece that sits in one of the windows there. And I'll let Alec describe it a bit more and talk about it more. But if you guys want to ask any questions or make any comments during Alec's time of talking, or any of the speakers, I should say, please do ask in the chat, and then I'll ask them the questions at the end of their 10-minute-ish. And then we'll also open it up afterwards after everyone's finished. Okay, so I'll hand you over to Alec. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to try and share my screen. Oh, yeah, thank you, Mena. So for those of you who've not seen the show yet, I thought it'd be sensible to show you the work. This is a version of it. The version that's in the gallery is slightly different in that it's in a case with a glass sort of, I don't know what you'd call it, thing on top, like a bubble. So it's housed in a kind of domestic box, if you like. And just show you different shots of it. So it's a model, and this piece I was thinking about where I am right now, although it's been lying around in bits in my little workroom for quite some time, and I was thinking about transitions and how precarious they can be, and I like sometimes the feeling of being in control. And then as soon as I'm in control, I like to let go. But I think we as humans have a relationship with the notion of control, and that we like to take an overview. But there comes a point when things get out of hand, rather like when a ship is launched. Once you've let go, there's no way you can stop it, and you have to kind of let go. And all throughout my practice as an artist, I've been focusing on that point at which you have to let go, and you become vulnerable in a situation where you're not really very sure. And I remember being at art school and that being a real problem to the art tutors, because they were very keen on product and producing, whereas me and a few others were interested in the opposite of that. And they didn't really like it. We liked it because, and I like it because it leads to a kind of giddy sensation, which still takes me by surprise. And when I get that sensation, I feel as though I'm onto something. I am a kind of eclectic artist. I move around quite a bit, collecting things randomly and then make sense of them. Sometimes I'm using traditional things that you'd find, paints, brushes, and also bits and pieces of stuff. I see them as ingredients in my activities. So the activity in the studio is very similar to an activity where I might be collecting things. This is an example of a piece of work earlier where I made a series of drawings, if you like, using embroidered thread to draw lines that tracked my movements out and about in the neighbourhood. And I used the drawn line traced in a phone app as a map making exercise to then try to trace the trail, if you like, of where I was. Really as a way of actually occupying myself. I quite like embroidery. I quite like the activity of stitching repetitively, and that's what this really is about. But the main pictures are the work in the show. that's an image of some of the things that I get up to. That's me buffing the hotel room that I was staying at. I asked if I could borrow the buffer, and I just wanted to engage in some meaningful duties while I was staying in the hotel, and recorded it as an activity. I wouldn't say it was art. I'm not sure if it is art or not. That's not really the point. The point was to escape from what I think art must be, which goes back to what I was saying about the process, because I believe that to me, artistic activity occurs in a field, if you like, a field of distribution, which is probably less defined, or probably not even defined. So there's one of the drawings that I had made of one of the walks that I went on. So the bits and pieces that I collect make these kinds of things. I find when I'm on my walks, and then the walks, sometimes they're using just the mode of walking, but sometimes I'll be using a sweeping brush and I'll be sweeping along a certain line, and I've built up a collection of photographs of me sweeping over the years, going back to a younger me. But this is a picture of me sweeping a Catholic seminary in Scotland. So I tend to sort of, as I say, engage in these kind of strange, seemingly purposeless activities, because I'm trying to get at the purpose of art is its purposelessness, which is something that interests me quite a bit, partly because of the paradox of that claim, actually, that the purpose of art is its purposelessness, which goes back to something that is to do with the joy of doodling or riffing or playing. There's no pressure to produce something, and I think I get my best work when I'm not trying, as I say earlier on, letting go. And the paradox of letting go means that you're giving something up rather than building something. So I think that's 10 minutes. I don't want to encroach on anybody else's time, so I'm going to stop.
Okay, thank you, Alec. We've had a couple of Q&As or comments from Carl Edwards saying dome, and I don't know if that's just a question to what he was asking earlier about the sort of encasing that's in, but
yes, dome.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, dome.
Words don't come easily sometimes. The dome, thank you. I'm sure it's got a better word than that. I'll have to Google it.
Julie's just put that it's a glass bell jar.
Bell jar. Thank you. Yes.
So yeah. Okay. Is there any more questions or comments from any of the audience? So
glass bell jar.
Not.
Well, I'll stay till the end.
Not,
do I feel that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I do actually, Julie. I do. In my job as an artist, I feel it's my duty to defend something that's vulnerable, something that is unnoticeable, the nothingness of something, but without being defensive, because so it's a hard. I see what I think I get what you're saying. Yeah, the paradox is that you're building something up into something that initially it wasn't. Dan Buren talked about art being at its most honest in its place of making, and that always has stuck with me. As soon as it leaves that place of making, it accumulates layers of meaning and value that the artist may never have intended, but that's tough. That's what happens when you make something and you take it away, you export it, it starts to build up connotations, values, or whatever that may or may not have been intended. But that's also part of the fun. But trying to, for me, art is an event. It's something that it's time-based. It's in a moment which is fixed in space-time, if you like. It's embodied by a thing, a medium, or whatever. But art, for me, is a quality rather than something that can be quantified. And I think that's pretty much it, actually. And it's worth defending against those people who would turn it into something that it's not. Politicians, for example. Oh, it's being recorded. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. But anyway, it starts to become part of a commodity economy, which I think artists need. Of course they do, but that's not the reason why they do it. I don't think. Anyway, I'll shut up now.
Okay, thank you, Alec. Anybody else have anything to say on that? Or everyone okay for us to move on? Nope. Okay, thank you very much, Alec. I'll see if there's any more questions or comments at the end. Right. We're now going on to our second speaker. Mr. Christopher Higson. So he's, for those of you again who've been to the exhibition or seen the video, there's a big painting of a Mexican butcher. I can't pronounce the name of the place. I wasn't sure how to pronounce it, so I'm not going to try. And Chris is the artist behind the painting. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Christopher. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, basically it's part of a series of paintings. I haven't really been painting for, it's kind of like the first kind of time I've dedicated myself to painting as a medium for maybe 8 years. Kind of fell out of love with it when I was at university, thanks to the Sheffield Hallam. But before that, it was kind of the first sort of medium that I dabbled with. So it was kind of nice kind of reconnecting to it. And kind of didn't happen as a conscious thing. It kind of just happened because I was fortunate enough to be able to go to Mexico a few times in the space of 4 years. And it was just a natural process of trying to recapture some of the things that really was quite poignant to me while I was out there over there in my travels. They were kind of me trying to re-sculpt kind of like memories, as it were. So like if something kind of stood out as I was walking through or exploring places, and it became like a visual kind of memory. It was born out of trying to kind of reimagine that memory that I had from that particular place or whatever. So there was this kind of breakdown within the paintings where kind of happens in memory, where you kind of don't remember all the specific details or all of the elements that actually existed in reality. You kind of somehow your brain kind of picks and chooses, sometimes completely at random. You can kind of remember some really random stuff sometimes, but your memory kind of picks and chooses what it wants to remember from that particular moment in time. So the paintings kind of have this kind of element. I'll see if I can get it up on there while I'm talking about it. An element of kind of a breakdown. So there it is. So yeah, so it's kind of like a reconfigurement of like a memory. So it's not completely whole as a thing. There's some elements to it that are very naive and very sort of basic, as it were. And there's there's other elements that are quite a lot more detailed, and there's also a little bit of like artist license kind of making up there as well. But as a whole, it is kind of as I remember that kind of snapshot. Let's see if I can get some other photos up. So yeah, it's a kind of a series that I was going through based around my travels in Mexico. I was fortunate to go there because my other kind of occupation is a chef in a restaurant. I have a kind of a Mexican restaurant, so that allowed me to be able to visit a country that I've always kind of had a massive admiration for from a very early age, and it was a bit of a dream come true going there. And so the art is kind of the art that I've created from those travels. It has a very big impact on me personally because of the country itself and the impact that has on me. Initially, I fell in love with the place because of my passion as a young boy for history. I remember when I was younger, there wasn't much information out there, but I remember kind of falling in love with the imagery of Aztecs and the eagle and jaguar warriors, and in particular, and kind of how they looked, and the very sort of different kind of visual aesthetic they had from what I was used to, which was obviously kind of British or European history at the time. And then later on in my kind of late teens, I started to kind of fall in love with the cuisine as it started to become more popular in this country. Although kind of looking back now, I realize it wasn't quite authentically Mexican cuisine. It was actually Tex-Mex. That's another story altogether. And yeah, and then obviously my passion, and then as I kind of started to explore the cuisine, I started to realize very quickly that it was so interlinked with the history of the country, and they were so kind of, you can't really have one without the other. I've never kind of known a cuisine that is so kind of coupled with the history as it is in Mexico. It's so important. It's actually a religion pretty much. So it kind of became this match made in heaven, as it was. And then that allowed me, obviously through the restaurant, that allowed me the opportunity to go over there and travel. And that's when I realized that the actual country itself was just as magical, and the people and the kind of the environment of it all. So it became like this trilogy of three incredibly strong things that had a massive impact on me personally. And so when I came back, I just felt like I had to kind of incorporate it into my artwork, and it kind of inspired me to get back into painting, which I absolutely love doing. It was one of those things where you kind of give yourself a clip around the ear a little bit, because you kind of tell yourself off, like, why didn't I do that sooner? You know, why did I kind of walk away from it? Which is, I think as a creative person, is kind of like the magical thing about art. You kind of, sometimes you may lose touch with it. And when you kind of reconnect with it, you kind of realize the importance that being creative is to you as an individual. So that was a really nice experience. And kind of wanting to kind of portray the country and the things that I was experiencing out there through paint. I was using it as almost like a task to try and be a little bit more disciplined perhaps than I have been in the past with paint. So rather than being not totally abstract, but rather than being quite abstract, I kind of wanted to be a bit more disciplined, and kind of wanted to try and educate myself a little bit by forcing myself to try and be more representational, but not too much. And that, I quite enjoyed that as well. It also had its pitfalls as well, but I quite enjoyed that kind of challenge as well. So I've got a whole series of work. So the one that's in the the one that's in the exhibition is this scene. We were traveling around this little village high up in the mountains called Cwestiynnau. It's kind of famous as the magical town. It is magical. It's got loads of little beautiful tales and stories, history about how the town was created, and it's got its own even kind of semi-modern history with the Spanish conquest and everything since. It's a very sort of complex area. It's got a very unique story behind it. So it was a very magical place. It wasn't full of tourists at all. It was still had a very sort of authentic feel to it. In fact, I think I was actually the only kind of Westerner there, so we were kind of getting a few strange looks, but that was quite nice. So yeah, when we were walking around these cobbled streets, things were kind of popping out, visuals were popping out to me, things that were kind of different culturally to what you're used to around here, and things such as the market stalls, which were full of all sort of exotic ingredients and crafts and all sorts. And then there would be things like butcher shops, which were still very romantic, I guess, in a way, because they had the whole, you know, all the animals on display. You know, they'd have every part of the animal. There'll be pigs' heads hanging up. There'll be the intestines. There'll be different kind of meats that were being dried, or loads of different processes going on. And it was kind of very strong image for me. And this one image in particular was of this fella who I presume had just purchased something from the butcher that was on the side of the street, and he was on his way out of the butchery. And I think he was putting his money back in his pocket, but it kind of looked very mischievous. He had a very kind of mischievous kind of charm to him. And I kind of just stuck in my memory, the composition of it. And so it was one of the things that I was desperate to paint when I got back. I was fortunate enough as well to capture it a little bit in a video that I took while I was there. So I had a little bit of reference. I could take a still from a video, and I had a bit of a reference there to kind of work with. And yeah, it's part of a series of paintings that I've done. So this one's from Cwestiynnau. I've got another one that's not in the exhibition. One of the things that I've really enjoyed painting is scenes from carnivals, which are so huge in Mexico, so culturally very important and so diverse. They're quite magical things to witness. This particular one was in a place called Oaxaca, which is pretty much the cultural hub of Mexico. It really is the jewel of the cuisine of Mexico, and it's the jewel of the crafts. It's a very magical area, and this particular the city of Oaxaca within the region has kind of daily carnivals, but we were very lucky while we were there to kind of coincide with a very important carnival, which was on for one day, which celebrated, I think it was about 10 different local small communities in the region of Oaxaca. And each little community had their own different outfit, different aesthetic, different music that they played, different dancers. It was so incredible. It was such a feast for the eyes and for the ears, and it was magical to see a really big place like that celebrating traditional and authentic and rural communities, and obviously the cultural importance of it all was really nice to see. I think that's a wonderful thing about Mexico that's starting to develop now, is that they're really starting to celebrate their roots and what makes them so culturally important, which is really nice to see. And hopefully it's come just in time before a lot of these things are lost. So this is a carnival scene of, I can't remember the actual community that this particular character was from, but it was a kind of like a bloke in like a clown type costume, homemade clown type costume with a rubber devil's mask. And within that troupe, there was also other characters. I think there was Donald Trump in there, which was quite nice to see. I think there was George Bush in there somewhere as well. They were mocking. And there was other characters. There was depictions of some musicians. I don't know whether they were famous or not. And underneath his wings, or within his cloak, is some small imagery of a man that was actually dressed in a kind of a leopard print kind of type dress, and a female's mask on with some makeup on. And it was just a very bizarre mix of characters that this troupe were displaying, and it kind of lived long in the memory. And really, there's no other reason why I put them together other than she had a yellow dress on and he had a yellow wings to his cape, so I just married the two. So that's a little carnival scene. This is another carnival scene, another community where they all had animal kind of schools, or they were kind of wearing some kind of item to do with a dead animal. So this particular chap had a buffalo type skull fragment strapped to his head with a balaclava, which was a kind of a unique arrangement. And then he had all these circles hand painted on his body. So that's another kind of scene that lived long in the memory. And in the background, just as a kind of a pictorial kind of background, I wanted to kind of get in a Nepalese kind of cactus chain link thing. Just because that is another very culturally important plant. It's in the flag. It's a food. They eat it. They eat two parts of the plant, actually. They eat the flower, which is called the pear, or over there they call it the tuna, actually. And they also eat the paddles. They shave the paddles down, and they eat the paddles as well. So, and wherever you go in Mexico, depending on the climate, it's grown everywhere. And I kind of like the fact that they have a lot of wild food that seems to be kind of free. So if you ever were kind of lucky enough to be in an area that you had that on your doorstep, even if you were really kind of poor, out of luck, you always were able to kind of harvest food. And I quite like that about Mexico. It doesn't matter what region you go to, there's always kind of lots of wild food out in the open, and I really like that. So that's another carnival scene. This is a kind of a naive depiction of a taxi in Oaxaca. No particular reason other than I just love the aesthetics of the taxis in Oaxaca. They're very sort of old, beat up, mostly beat up Nissan cars. And they depending on where you are in Mexico, sometimes they can really pimp them up with like Christmas lights, and sometimes you can get really religious with like Virgin Marys all over them and stuff. And I really like the aesthetic wackiness of it. And sometimes you even get some taxi drivers who seem to quite like to kind of street racer type, pimp up their cars. So I quite like that. It's kind of like an extension of a personality there. So I wanted to depict some of those. So I've got some of those in there. There's a series of taxis from all over the region. That's just a small snapshot of basically some of the Mexico series paintings. I've probably waffled for way longer than 10 minutes, which I apologize. I think that's it.
So thank you. We've had a couple of questions, so I don't know if you want them to be answered now, or do we want to go on to the next person?
How we're doing time-wise, because I obviously don't want to eat into everybody else's time, but I would love to answer them.
Should we just do them quick? Yeah?
Yeah, sure. I'll try and keep it short.
Okay, so Anthony Morris has said, some of us are familiar with your previous body of works. How important is photography to your current thread of painting practice? And do you feel that there are significant changes from the medium of photography to painting? Sorry, that's a long question, but it's a good question from Anthony, though.
Yeah, very good question, because that was actually a thing that I forgot to touch on. I wanted to kind of touch on maybe some of the other kind of mediums that I've dabbled with over the last few years that I'm quite surprised as somebody that's actually seen my photography. That's kind of quite nice. But I also did some drawings, some really detailed, kind of brutalistic, really obsessive drawings with like millions of lines in them. And I think there's one common thread between all the work, even though visually they look so different. And I was thinking about this earlier, and I think the one common thread between them all is there's a sort of a decomposition in whatever it is I'm working with. So whether it was the drawings, there was, what I really liked about it was kind of destroying the pens, the architectural pens that I was using. And I kind of really liked how, when you were using them almost as like a printer, like a human printer, after a while, the pens would just start to break on you and deteriorate, and they would create patterns. Kind of a little bit like when you like do rubbings over stone or whatever you want to do rubbings over, they kind of started to create strange patternations. And I really like that. And it's the same with the photography. All my photography works has mostly been to do with decomposition and deterioration of some sort. So initially it was photographing derelict buildings. Then I went on to trying to capture the beauty in dead animals or decomposing animals, because I thought there was a nice 50-50 kind of thing going on, where it was kind of a horrible subject matter, but there was actually really beautiful aesthetics in there. And that's to do with the beauty of decomposition and the kind of the deterioration of it. And then I did a kind of a Norweg photographic project, and a lot of that was to do with the deterioration and the decay and the kind of the layering of stuff. And so there is a common thread there, and it's the same kind of with these paintings, I guess, with the memory aspects and the fact that you have some things really detailed, and sometimes it's either really naive or sometimes it's really basic, and you can actually, in some areas of the paintings, you can see previous paintings where I've kind of gone over it and completely gone with a new direction. You can still see little elements that tell the storyline of that kind of particular material or canvas or whatever. The similarity between photography and painting is, I don't know, maybe that's the main thing. I really like I really like compositions, trying to frame a composition that might stick out. I really like that. But I am finding as well with the Mexico series that I am finding either video or photography quite important in my ability to paint those scenes. So I'd use a lot of my memory, but I'd also try and marry it with either a very raw image I might have of that exact scene, or of similar scenes that I could kind of use as a reference for some things. So I kind of, I suppose now with painting, I try and use photography a little bit as like a tool for my memory, maybe like a scrapbook type thing. I don't know, but I don't know whether I've answered any of the questions there, maybe, or not.
I think you have. There are a few of the comments from other people, and then Alex asked the question as well. I'm just conscious of time, so I think we'll go on to Julie.
Of course.
If you're okay with that, and then we'll come back to the questions at the end, okay? But a lot of people want to know about your Mexican restaurant, though.
Okay.
So you'll have to. All right, thank you very much, Chris. I'm conscious of time, so I will come back to the questions and comments that other people made during Chris's talk. But in the meantime, we'll go on to Julie so she can do her bit. And then, as I said, keep asking questions and making comments in the chat or the Q&A boxes. Thank you, Julie.
I don't know how anything I say can compete with talking about Mexican food from Oaxaca, but I'll do my best. My mouth is watering so much right now. My tea is really insufficient. I've been to Oaxaca, and like the meals are some of the most epic I've ever eaten in my life. That was so unfair, Chris. Thank you, though. And yes, I do want to know where your Mexican restaurant is, and we'll all like meet up and gorge ourselves. My work for the exhibition kind of brings together, I figured out probably 4 different threads of ideas and things that I've been working on for anywhere between 2 and 6 years. And I like that because it actually seems like a really simple project, that it's come from like these 4 directions within my practice. So I have them here. I can show you, hopefully without too many shadows. So these are a series of postcards. I took the image and created the postcards. Oh, it'll be in mirror, but it doesn't matter. And then I've cut them out. I'll show you one open so you can see the side. So these all have 3 layers to them. So
Well, I'll just show you my work in a second, and it's just interesting listening to that conversation because I feel I'm sitting at the other end of a kind of spectrum, really, because I think my work is quite political, but with lots of hazards that you can fall into by being so. And it's sort of, in a way, it's really interesting listening to Alec in particular because my work is sort of so different, but I kind of feel very envious of that kind of approach. Anyway, just a brief background. I was a teacher and I worked with educational technology and computers with children in the early days before the internet arrived, and I was really excited by all the creative possibilities that they offered, and it was amazing. And then I watched as artificial intelligence developed, and then the internet came along, and how it developed this incredible capability for collecting data. And first of all, it was for shopping, and then it's for voting, banking, and now it's for surveillance, as we know. And alongside all that, I did a really wonderful community-based part-time art degree in Bangor and met all these, amazing artists like Ai Weiwei and all these other artists that were kind of really exploring a lot of these ideas, and it sort of helped me to think about how I might do that. So I want to try and show some pictures just in the slideshow. So I need to share my screen, don't I? So the piece is called Average Woman and Average Man. And here's what the 2 pieces look like. They're digital prints with copper wire, and they're embroidered as a pattern, which uses the face recognition points in the form of a map. And I've been working on this theme for a really long time, actually, and I wanted to try and explain how I arrived at these images and some of the work that I've made along the way. And I thought about, I suppose early on I was thinking about how much of the information on us used to be in paper form. So all our certificates and passports and all sorts of documents were all in paper form. So I made this collage about that. But now everything is in a digital form, so it can all be incorporated into a barcode. So I made a kind of what I called a new phrenology type of head. You'll remember the old phrenology heads that had personalities all over the skull. Well, this was a sort of trying to represent this idea of us now being in digital form. And the theme of this exhibition, which is transition, I suppose it lies behind this work because it's the idea of moving from the old analog and paper-based world that we've been in all these years to this new digital world that we find ourselves in now. And over the last decade and more, these maps have been developed which identified key unique points on our faces and heads, which could be picked up by CCTV cameras and could uniquely identify each of us. And I started to sort of play around with making work about this. And then I began to think about how, if we could be mapped in this very mechanistic kind of way, what would this mean for our kind of lived, bodily, messy kind of human reality? And so I made a work as like a self-portrait of me behind a curtain. But the idea of that, you know, what was our sort of messy reality beginning to disappear? And this piece involves a photograph with it's almost like a shroud or a curtain, and pins and silver wire make up the grid on the face, based on the face recognition pattern. And the thing is, I suppose I was thinking about how can we challenge this, and people are challenging this idea that all these things can be recognised by CCTV cameras, and people have developed things called dazzle makeup, and you see that makeup and fringes being cut in certain ways will fool and confuse CCTV cameras. So there's been quite a lot of interesting work going on about that. And I was playing with this idea and made some clay masks, playing with some of these old materials to do with clay and rusted metal and acupuncture needles and things, using some of these other patterns. And I was also thinking about, or investigating actually, how much information you needed to be able to uniquely identify a person. And this is quite a confusing image, but it's a much bigger kind of composite of a lot of faces of very famous people that I put together. And if you go close up to it, it's very pixelated, obviously, but if you go close up, you can hardly identify a face at all. But if you stand a long way back from it, you can actually start to recognize people. So I thought that was interesting about how, in a way, how limited the information was that was being collected about us to identify us, and yet how it kind of didn't even begin to represent who we really were. So moving on just to this work now, this has been made from, these faces are composite, and it is an actual average. I used this sort of free online tool where you could combine a whole set of faces. So I picked about 50 faces of all different ages and races for the woman and for the man. And when you put these together, you got this really, I think, kind of quite strange, slightly disturbing kind of result, because it's literally an average. You can, well, actually it's quite pixelated, partly because that's the amount of information that was available. And then I overlaid them with, again, another, as I've done before, a sort of simple map of commonly used face recognition points as a basis for the embroidery, and with copper wire. And I suppose the copper's about electrical flow, but I kind of thought it looked like a sort of gilded cage as well. And there's lots more I could say about it. There's such huge things going on for us at the moment in relation to the pandemic and all the huge technological experiments that have been made at the moment and all the implications of these. And I suppose, in a way, this is sort of response to the last question, which is what role art can play in this. And if you're exploring these ideas and using technology and so on, is it really art? How can we sort of be investigating how we feel and explore the things that we're being kind of confronted with and experienced? And how can we work out what it is that we want to say? And actually I think that's all I wanted to say really now. So I need to stop the share. There we are.
Okay, thank you very much,
Thanks.
Sarah. It was really interesting. So we've had a couple of comments. So Alec said to us, look, that it's like facial fingerprints, which is quite scary, obviously.
Yeah.
And I had a question from Elizabeth Mercer. Your facial recognition pieces with a copper wire kind of remind me of death masks. It makes you think about the death of analog world. Was this a conscious decision?
Yeah. Yes. Yes, I suppose it was sort of trying to explore a lot of those things. I didn't, you know, when you do something that you experiment and you don't intend them, but the one with the face behind the curtain, I realised later it looked a bit like the Turin shroud. Reminded me a little bit of that, and it's sort of, again, it's sort of quite, and it's what materials you use. It's sort of using digital tools, but also, you know, I'm quite interested in using old materials like clay and metal and rust, and there's a sort of illusion about which is real and which isn't.
Yeah, interesting. It's really interesting. Right, I don't think, is there any more comments or questions about Sarah's work or about anybody's works now, from anybody? In the meantime, I'll go back to the ones that we had for Chris. Thank you, Sarah, in the meantime. But we had a couple more for Chris's. I'll just go back to them. Alec asked Chris, do you think being away from painting as an activity, or walking away, as you say, helped in some way or made you a different painter?
I think it made me a different painter than what I would have been if I hadn't have walked away, because I think I would be further along the journey of kind of an identity in terms of a style, maybe for sure. But apart from that, not necessarily. I mean, it was really nice to kind of fall back in love with it, but no, not necessarily. It was kind of I just had to take a distance from it because I was really disillusioned with it, basically.
Does that answer your question, Alec? Thank you, Chris.
There's no right or wrong answer.
Exactly.
I'm just interested in, sometimes when you walk away from something, you get a different perspective, or you get a perspective that you didn't have when you're up close to it. I found that when I've walked away from something and come back to it, it's somehow different. Might not be better, it might be worse, but you're coming back to it for a different reason than maybe there was there than maybe was there before. Maybe on different terms of engagement, but it's nice when you fall back in love with something. I like that.
Yeah, I think it was, well, basically what happened was I went to university, and right from the very beginning, I was asked why I painted what I painted, and I didn't have an answer other than it's just what came out when I picked up a paintbrush, and they didn't like that because they wanted it to be more conceptual, and I didn't have an answer for it, and I was kind of embarrassed in front of everybody else, and I felt kind of like it made me doubt my own practice. So I stopped there and then. I didn't do it for 8 years. So the distance made me realize that they were wrong and I was right. And you don't necessarily have to have a purpose, divine purpose, or some big theory as to why you're doing something. Not all the time. You can just do something because that's what you do. And I started to really fall back in love with people who kind of just do for the sake of doing, like outsider artists or folk artists who kind of just do rather than actually.
Yeah, no, we seem to have developed a kind of squeamishness around this idea of the urge, as if there's something wrong with having the urge to do something, as if it's a particularly white male teachers who have an issue around hearing a so-called non-intellectual approach to making art. And I don't know where that comes from, because we are, after all, human beings, and we have urges. I'm not suggesting that for 1 minute that's what it's all about, but I think when you're at art school, I thought the purpose was to find out what someone's motivations were, and then to develop them rather than make them feel ashamed.
That's exactly what it should
my
be.
opinion, though.
That is exactly what it should be. But unfortunately, I genuinely do, from my experience of university anyway, they were trying to channel everybody into conceptual art, and that's
Right.
that, you know, if you're a conceptual artist and that's what makes you happy, then that's fantastic. But not everybody is, and I think in general maybe the art world was falling out of love of certain mediums and certain styles of artwork, but I think it's kind of coming back by the looks of things, and it's quite nice to see there's more diversity again.
Thank you both of you. But yeah, it can be quite difficult when that happens, and as Alec said, it's a really good thing when you come back in love with something as well.
Can I just say something about that?
Yeah.
The art degree I did in Bangor, the part-time community-based one, really wasn't like that at all. It was very exploratory and supportive and sort of rich, really. So
a massive fan of Parkmenai. It's a jewel in the crown of North Wales, and it should be supported more. So I'm glad to hear that was an experience you had over there.
Yeah, actually, it was the Bangor University one, but it was, but it had incredible. I mean, they were very similar, very similar in their approach. So they're both. I mean, in the Parkmenai one, it's really good. So yeah. Unfortunately, it's like this thing about the arts not being valued, that the one that I was on got closed despite the number of people who had been doing it.
That's something we could probably talk about for hours. Yeah, it's a massive crying shame, and I don't think there's ever been a period in human existence where it's as undervalued as it currently is. And I think there's something massively wrong there, and I think it needs to be respected more.
Yeah.
Thank you both. Oh, three of you actually. We've had I'm just going to go through these questions because I'm conscious that we're getting up to 8:20, and I don't want to take too much of other people's time now. But there's one here for you, Sarah, from Peter. And it says, has Sarah seen the recent documentary film, The Social Dilemma, which is quite alarming about algorithms and information gathering?
I know the film. I haven't seen it yet. It's on my list. But I mean, there's an awful lot of films like that around at the moment. It's just, there's so much about what's happening, whether it's with algorithms or Cambridge Analytica, and I've got references coming out of my ears if anybody's interested. I think watching the A-level thing that happened recently told us a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Peter, for that question. And then there's just one from Juncan Mori, which says, amazing variation of practice from you all. Enjoying listening a lot. Thank you, Junco. And she asks, is artist's role should be in such diverse what is the artist's role, what should it be in such a diverse world? Sorry, I messed that up big time.
Who wants to go first?
I think it was a divisive world. I mean, diversity, yes. We revel in diversity. I suppose it comes back to that point about politics. No one likes having it, rammed down their throat, and art is an open church. Maybe that's not the right word, and people can bring to it whatever they want. That's the beauty of diversity. But the divisiveness, I think that's a really tricky one, because Yeah, I don't know.
I
don't like it. I don't like divisiveness, obviously, but I don't know what to do about it.
Isn't it the case that in a way art's about explore? You know, this sounds a bit of a cliche, but it's exploring about what it means to be human and what our experience is of things. And so, if the things that we explore as individuals, we're all human beings, there can be things that we share with other people, and that it gives people sort of insights and empathy, or not. I don't know. I think if something is very didactic and very kind of you know, like propaganda, then that's a different form of activity, really. And I think that's the struggle I feel, because there's sort of lots of things I kind of want to say, and how do I hold myself back from being kind of propagandist and make something that's more kind of intuitive, I suppose. That's been the sort of journey I'm on, I think.
I think massive shout out to Junko, by the way, who's a very, very, very talented young lady. So if anybody's interested in sculpture, they should check her out, because she's she should be celebrated. But I think art, regardless of who you are or who's doing it, should be honest first and foremost. Your honesty with whatever it is you're engaging with, and then as soon as it's put out into the public view, it depends on what kind of art that is and how that person interprets it. So it could be political, for example. I think art has an incredibly important role to play in society, and it should be celebrated more in today's world. You know, we should be, you know, art in general should be challenging social issues, politics. It should be something that brings refuge to people in times of trouble. It should be inspiring. It should be something, even if it's just something that somebody just likes looking at of an evening when they're coming back from work and they've got it on their wall or whatever. It should be something that just it brings something to the table. And as long as there's an honest dialogue between the artist and whatever it is that they're doing, then I think that's what it, you know, there's loads of different channels that comes from that, but that's the core importance of it, really.
Yeah. I think it was Joseph Beuys who referred to it as a healer. And I've always liked Joseph Beuys, because he was a teacher and an artist, and he's helped me balance that in my own mind. But the idea of it being a gift, the idea of it being a healer, I think is one way of thinking about a less divisive world.
For sure.
If that answers the question.
And it's finding out what's in common between us, isn't it? Really, it's another cliche, you know, our sort of common humanity, and that's surely part of it.
I think art is something that everybody should do, whether they feel creative or not. It's something that everybody should do. I think there's a stereotype that you have to be artistic or creative in order to do art, but it's something that everybody should do. And I think even just people who think that they're not part of that particular world, when they do actually open themselves up to doing it, they realize it has a massive beneficial impact on their mental health, for one. So I think it's something that everybody has a deep longing for and a desire to do, and an inner happiness when they do it. So it's something that everybody should do, regardless of whether they feel it's their kind of environment or not.
Yeah, I feel the same way in the words, but I can get so pessimistic about like its purpose, because it's so easy to attack on a class based on it's so easy to point the finger and be like, you useless people. So I think we as artists almost have to be a little bit more what's the word? Not sneaky, but like I'm not going to think of the word, but to create meaning in something, like the pieces of artwork or the objects or anything that I have that have meaning to me were from a person, were from a place, had an embedded experience, had a thought, reminds you of something else. And I think art objects are particularly useful in doing that sort of thing. If someone can have a legitimate experience with an art object or an art experience, like transformative places, transformative installations, when you're at a festival and you have that feeling of pure freedom to be whoever you are, if you're in the middle of an installation, if you're using a mug that someone made and you met that person, like that makes, I think art has the potential to embed normal objects and everyday motions and experiences and things that we do with a heightened sense of being human.
I agree completely, yeah.
But it's so easy just to be like, go away, you guys are using up too much money and not doing anything, and everything that you do comes under attack all the time. I mean, I see what's happening here with the arts. Like, I've never really worked as an artist in the States, but it's so similar. Like every time the National Endowment for the Arts gets like $1 million from the government, like whatever comes out of that $1 million just gets attacked from every direction, and then they lose all their funding again. So I think it's just a matter of changing the language that the arts uses, and talk more about technology, talk more about science, talk more about math, talk more about whatever it is that you're engaged with, which could be, you know, use those horrible words like cultural exchange or like art and technology and all those terms that we hate to write and we hate to talk about, but that is a way to express what it is, our value, and what it is that we are contributing to other people, to our communities, to our microcosms, and as a knock-on effect to society as a whole.
There's a whole other hour, 2 hours conversation going on there, really.
Yeah.
We could go on about it. But thank you all very much, and I'm sure Junko appreciated those answers as well, so thank you all. Now I'm going to wrap it up now because it is coming to an end, so I don't know if anybody's got any quick questions left, but in the meantime I'm going to thank everyone, all four of you, for your time, and for everyone that's watching as well.